Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole-person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
Hi, it's Dr. Greg Jantz. As a counselor now for 40-ish years, my goodness, we've seen something particularly the last 5 years and accelerating and continuing to accelerate. It is called digital addiction. Another way of saying digital addiction could be social media virus. Another way of saying this could be it's an epidemic of computer or technology addiction. What does that look like? Well, right now, depending on who exactly you read, we know that screen time is averaging among our 13 to 18-year-olds, okay, 13 to 18. So we've got the teenagers. It is, in most cases, 8+ hours a day steady. In many cases, I have read where it's averaging 12 hours and plus. So if you take, social media virus, as I put it, and you add up all that time, we know it, for the teenagers and young adults, it is somewhere between the 8 to 12 hours a day. The whole idea of digital addiction, does this really exist? There's not actually a diagnosis yet. I believe we will see one in the future. But what we know by digital addiction, well, I can tell you what we see here at the Center A Place of Hope. We do have a fair number of clients who come, and when they come, we initially take everything with the screen. I mean cell phones, laptops, tablets, anything with a screen, and we set it aside. And it's initially for 72 hours. Now, I can tell you that there is a very high percentage of individuals who have a real hard time with that. In fact, such a hard time that what they will do is by day 2 and day 3 it intensifies, they are getting all the symptoms of withdrawal. They'll complain of headaches. Sometimes we've seen sweaty palms, this anxiousness in the gut, and high irritability, and really sometimes demanding that they have their device. They have to take care of something important. The digital addiction. And the question to ask is, how well would you do for 3 days without this? I remember recently, I was on a boat. I dropped my phone overboard. I almost dived in after it. I didn't. And I recall, okay, I'll have to have that replaced. But it was over the weekend, and I didn't have an opportunity. And so part of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it wasn't until later on Monday that a diver, I was in a place where the divers work near a port, a diver retrieved my phone and sent me an email of it with the correct time and said my phone survived nearly 3 days underwater. And, I was already in the process of getting a new one. But what did I experience? Well, I experienced some anxiety, some anxiousness. What if somebody's trying to reach me? What if I've missed something really important? What if there was an emergency? Do you catch all the what ifs? There's something called FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out. I think I had some fear of missing out. Absolutely. Here's the thing. After about the third day, the symptoms go away for most, and people begin to feel something else. Oh, fifth day by a week, it's called relief. I feel like the stronghold of technology is not on me. It's the relief. I feel like I have freedom. You have to get through this withdrawal. It's kind of like any addiction. You got to get through it to see the other side and experience the other side. Let's talk about what social media does. What's it do? It can create a social media cocktail. Let me describe that. Dopamine. Dopamine is a brain chemical. It's known as dopamine as the feel-good chemical. Dopamine. Dopamine is released at times during gaming. Dopamine is released in part in exercise. But social media, we call it social media hits. Everything elevates the intensity. It elevates the dopamine levels. And besides dopamine, there are some other adrenaline. And so this is why it's called the social media cocktail. And some call this the social media lubricant. Right. You feel good as you're doing it. The dopamine's going, adrenaline, and I feel the energy from the social media. And it's how fast am I going with my thumbs? And you feel it. And you absolutely feel a mood elevation. And that's what we're talking about, the social media lubricant. Get off of social media, you go through the withdrawal. There is, truly, I've seen it so many times with my own eyes and experience, there is the technology addiction. We know, and some of the research is showing us approximately age 3-ish, where a lot of times we see a tablet or an iPad, something put in that toddler's hands, as you see this in restaurants, as a way to babysit. It's the electronic pacifier. And age 3 to age 10, the screen use really, really goes up. It really is the pacifier. And what we're finding by age 9, 10, we are seeing some effects, the research is showing, on brain development. You overstimulate that developing brain, too much screen time, too much intensity, and the average age to exposure to pornography on the internet's probably age 9 and even lower. So we have those issues. It's called danger to the brain. This is actually being referenced in the literature as dangerous to the brain. In fact, even our government, with the Surgeon Health General, in a report, used those words, dangerous to the brain. What is social media? What is technology addiction doing? Research now is certainly very clear. We know that brain development, a lot of brain growth going age 10 to 19. And this is also when kids do a lot of, at times, risk-taking behavior. This is where we can see even depression or anxiety emerge during this time of heavy social media use. And the amygdala, part of the brain, is where we do emotional learning. What's appropriate socially, just emotional learning. And we see this greatly impaired many times for kids that have had excessive screen time and engagement early on of gaming and pornography use. This is where we begin to see a anxious and depressed brain due to technology use or due to screen time. Now, there's the other side. If it's social media, there is everything that goes along with that. There's the comparisons, there's the sexualization, the sexual content in social media that is being targeted towards our youth is unending. And so that early engagement, the comparisons, I look at somebody else online, they look better, sexier, and you begin to set up for a lot of not only screen time, but a lot of depression and anxiety. We know that there is a such thing as problematic gaming and social media use. You can do a lot of great things when you're online, a lot, absolutely. School and lessons and online learning, but the other side that is harder to self-regulate is the gaming, is the social media, and the addictive, and what we're really saying here is the addictive qualities of that. Now, we know here in the prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain where we're supposed to be making our executive or wise decisions. This is the prefrontal cortex. All decision making goes through there unless you become impulsive. And as you become impulsive, you act out without thinking. And we know that we see this with gaming, we see this social media, real acting out. Let's say you're a teenager and you're already doing risky behavior as a teenager, and you begin to act out more and more, and social media really adds to this. I personally believe that gaming can. We know that, for example, game designers actually do hire behavioral psychologists in order to, how do we extend a person's engagement in this game? How do we keep them on it? We got dopamine going in the brain, we got the adrenaline going, we got the brain chemistry is being altered. We've created what we call a craving brain. We're craving more and more and more of that. The stimuli. So much craving, then it turns into a depressed brain. So here's what we know. That prefrontal cortex, you become more impulsive. Then the next thing we see is a loss of emotional regulation. Emotional regulation, how to keep our emotions in check and balanced, not to have excessive anger and irritation, fear, keeping the emotions. The feel good of even social media at the time or gaming, the feel good is really strong. Now, that strong feel good also will result in uneven emotion regulation. We know that girls, and here's some recent research that I made a note of, girls, looks like about age 11 and 13, when they're engaged in social media, they're reporting back less life satisfaction. Well, let's just say there's a lot of attacks on girls, media, sexual confusion, and what we're finding is that decrease of life satisfaction early on, at age 11, 13. Boys report this even more at ages 14 to 15. And this is also a very vulnerable period of brain development that we've talked about. Some of the depression they'll begin to experience will continue. And the depression and anxiety can lead to early experimentation with drugs, early experimentation with pornography, and so we keep this addictive brain going. So now we have not even mentioned, with technology addiction and social media, cyberbullying, body image issues, and then I have to mention this because I used to work in a sleep lab. The poor sleep, how overengagement in the digital world of technology, overstimulating that brain, creating that craving brain, affects sleep. Not only falling asleep, but their kids are engaged in sleeping with their phone under their pillows. They don't miss out. Staying up all night in a gaming world, and we'll say things like, those are my friends, they are my friends. So the outcome of all this right now doesn't sound too positive, and ultimately I'm seeing more and more younger adults saying, no, I realize I'm addicted. This is a problem. I'm addicted. And this looks a lot like substance use. Very similar withdrawal symptoms, the intense cravings. It's also, you'll see it in a gambling brain. And so as we look at this and go, all right, if a person's not able to regulate their social media or technology, and they're not able to regulate content, not able to have time boundaries and content boundaries, there will be issues. And this has been a ticking time bomb for quite some time. I did a little book called Social Media and Depression. We began to see this happen over and over and over, and we started looking at the social media and just the dilemma with it. Yeah, some positives, absolutely, but the downside of being controlled ultimately in the social media. And so I have this whole area here, a little chart that talks about impaired control, social impairment, what creates risky use, just like any other addiction. And it causes you to isolate. It causes you to pull away from people, not engage in people. So as we look at this, I think it's fair to say this is not only a social media virus, a technology virus, but there's an epidemic of sizable numbers and proportions of individuals, particularly younger, who are really caught up in the stronghold of the technology addiction. I'm going to put social media under technology. I'm going to put gaming under technology addiction. And it can really, really ruin a life. And it does. I say this soberly because I've seen and know of people that this has been true of. And I see the clients coming to us who have the withdrawal symptoms. I believe it is something that many will need expert help to overcome. It's such a strong attachment in the brain to this technology that to overcome it requires sizable commitment and accountability, and how to also redesign your life. Many times I'll hear an individual say, who's really an addict, they'll say, I don't know what else to do. Everything else is boring. I don't know what else to do. Everything else is boring. And you have to redesign your life. You have to redesign life goals. And think about the health implications. There is the health implications. Usually there's poor nutrition. Usually the sleep is disruptive. I'm going to say that immune function must be suppressed because many times they're not even getting outside, not doing exercise. So let's look at this from a whole person point of view. There's also a spiritual side to this. That these strongholds and things that can keep us addicted, keep controlling us. There's a spiritual side to that must be addressed. This affects every relationship. This will affect work, livelihood. This is an escapism that is a strong addiction that a person will choose over and over and over. So let's look at every area of one's life. We've got to get down to the core issues. What is the technology? What needs is it meeting in an indirect, unhealthy way? What is it? And there's a need for a relationship. There's a need for belonging. Gaming, you feel like you belong to a certain community. There's a need to feel importance. Oh, I do this really well. I don't do anything else really very well. Yeah, recreating a life requires a new life. Accountability, wisdom, and somebody that's going to walk alongside you for a significant period of time. We do have to look and just examine, are there other addictions that will creep in? Sometimes I've seen I kind of deal with the technology addiction, and now I'm turned to food, and food is the addiction of choice. We call that dancing between addictions. And as you look at dancing between addictions, we look towards getting to the core issues that keep creating. Is it hurt, abandonment? What is the hurt that is creating a cycle of addiction? Because an addiction is a way of meeting certain needs in such a way that we don't even realize what we're doing. That's the power of addiction. All right, hope comes when there's a plan. We just got to create a plan on how to be healthy and happy in the digital world we're living in, and to protect our kids. And that's an ongoing endeavor, but there is hope.